What is up? And welcome back to another episode of the Wizards podcast. I'm your host, Greg Finberg. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about one of the worst defensive performances I've ever seen in my life. The Wizards lose 153 to 131 to the Sixers. Again, it's a tank, and we understand that. But even some tanking losses, it kind of leaves you just kind of speechless at how bad the team is. And again, this team isn't that bad. The defensive effort was just awful. And effort can mean two things. It could mean your showing or your performance. It could also mean your actual effort, how much energy you are giving, how much fight and pride you show on the defensive end. Neither was there, but more so the pride and the effort thing on defense, because the amount of wide open lanes, the lack of defensive resistance, both on the ball, on the perimeter, and in the interior around the rim was just non-existent. It was awful. One of the worst defensive performances I've ever seen. And as a result, Washington allows Philadelphia, a mid-Philly team without Joel Embiid, to put up 153 points. It's the most that Philadelphia scored against the Washington Wizards since 1962. You have to go back that long to find a time where they scored almost as much as they scored tonight. A truly pathetic effort. It's saying something that with 6 games left in the rebuild, an effort can kind of give me this type of reaction, because the last month, honestly, since the All-Star break, I haven't really been animated after most losses because you're numb to it, but you expect it. And they play all right in a lot of these losses. They just lose because a lot of guys are out and they're not a good basketball team. Tonight, it was not one of those nights. Tonight was a night where they looked like they were an unprepared basketball team. They had a bad game plan. And once Philly figured it out, they had no sort of adjustments to it. They played no defense. They didn't seem like the team that really cared about winning this game. And obviously, a lot of my comments on Twitter were aimed at Brian Keefe, and is he the coach for the future? Again, it's games like this where you sit back and yes, there's injuries and stuff, but you kind of got to think, is this the guy? If this is the type of effort he's getting, even with guys that are young and trying to prove themselves in the league, they didn't seem like they really cared about the result tonight. And that's saying something in a tanking loss. So again, Wizards fall 153 to 131 against Philadelphia. A lot to get to in this one. Obviously, we'll be breaking down the game. There's a lot of good that came out of this tanking wise, and more good that can come with Indiana up, I think 17 on Chicago at halftime. If they win, then the Wizards would become the league's worst team, which would be great. More on that when we get to the tank standings later. But a lot of injuries again tonight. The same five that have been out for a while: Trae Young, Anthony Davis, Keyshawn George, D'Angelo Russell, and Cam Whitmore. Again, they're all out still. And then you also had Leaky Black and Julian Reese. Leaky Black was at the game. I think Julian Reese is with Go-Go because they start the playoffs. If it was either tonight or tomorrow. So that's why he didn't play. But that's 7 guys that were out for Washington, leaves them with about 11 available players. And obviously, the game went as expected. There is an injury update on Anthony Davis. The Wizard said he was cleared for light contact after he was reevaluated by a doctor in LA on Monday. And they'll obviously update it as they feel fit. There's 6 games left, after tonight. Anthony Davis is not playing for the Washington Wizards. If he does, I would be completely shocked. I'm fine saying this now because if he does, I'm okay being wrong, because that would be a crazy thing for Washington to do after you drag this out for as long as possible and you keep putting out these injury updates and keep pretending like, oh, we're trying to bring him back. We're just going to keep operating as if, number one, we're not tanking, and number two, we don't want to lose, which, that's how they're operating. And number three, that there's any point, motivation, or incentive from both parties to bring this injury-prone player back this late in a season where you are now 17 and 59, 6 games left. He's not playing. And if you believe he's playing, then you got it. That's fine by me. It seems like it's the same with Trae Young, the same with Keyshawn George. Like, these guys are not going to play. There's no reason for them to at this point. Maybe a couple of games ago, you could have said, hey, let's get them some reps. There's 6 games left. You're terrible. The more you lose, the better. AD's not playing. Trae's not playing. He's probably not playing. And that's kind of where I'm at with it. And I get what the Wizards are doing. They have to do it. They have to keep up this image of, hey, look, we're trying to be transparent. We're trying our best to get our best players healthy and available to play. They're not going to play. And the quicker Wizards fans, I guess, realize that and know that they'll probably have to wait till October, probably the better for them. But that's some injury updates on them. And then obviously getting into the game itself. Um, Rough start for Tristan Vukcevic. I mean, you got the whole Tristan Vukcevic experience early in this game because there was one play on the defensive end where there was a defensive rebound, and instead of grabbing it with two hands, Tristan just like batted the ball to a teammate. He could have full gone and grabbed it, but lazy, and he bats it to a Dembona who goes up for a layup. That was a bad play. There's another play on the other end where Tristan goes up for a floater. He misses. He hangs his head, doesn't get back on defense, leads to an odd man break for Philadelphia on the other end. And then you go and he obviously has a couple more bad plays, misses some shots, and not good from that end. Some bad defensive plays as well because the defense, again, still has a long ways to go from Tristan. But then he starts to make his shots. He hits a floater, he hits a pair of threes, and he has 10 points in the first couple of minutes before he sits for that first stint. And so you kind of got the best of both worlds from Tristan. Still needs to be more consistent on the defensive end, showcase what he can do on the offensive end, especially being a stretch forward. So again, you're not seeing too much of Tristan that you don't already know, but he was actually really good offensively. You think he finished with 17 points on 6 of 7 from the field. I think he went 3 of 3 from three. He was really good. The Wizards were doing good when he was playing, but the issue is pretty early in that second quarter, he picked up his third foul, didn't play for most of the first half, barely played in the second half. And so again, not crazy defensive numbers for Tristan, good offensive numbers. That's kind of how it typically goes for him. Trey Johnson was really bad for I would say apart from a stretch where he hit all three of his shots tonight. Again, really bad. He started 0 of 8, I believe, was 0 of 6 in the first half. Finished with 8 points on 3 of 11 from the field, 2 of 5 from three. Again, the one stretch where he scored, it was a nice 18-foot pull up in rhythm, and then a catch and shoot three and a step back three, all like in the span of 2 minutes. Apart from that, he just wasn't in rhythm. He was forcing some shots, missing some shots that he would typically make, some deep threes that, again, maybe not a good shot for others, but a good shot for him. He's made him in the past, hasn't been making them lately. He was not good. He also had a couple instances where in the last couple of games, he's just been kind of lazy on defense. There's a lot of times he got blown by tonight by Philadelphia's guards. He's reaching in a lot. He had one on Maxey. He had another one on Paul George. The George one you could see coming from a mile away. He still couldn't get his hand out of there. That's been a little bit of a lingering issue the last couple of games. So again, I've had some people still asking me, are you concerned? I'm not. He's 20 years old. He's not even done his rookie season. He's only playing 20, 24 minutes a night. He's not playing with the greatest players around him. No Trae Young, no Anthony Davis in these lineups. When I see him with those guys in his second year, and if he's still struggling, then yes, you can evaluate it. You can be concerned. As a rookie, I'm not going to choose to be concerned. We've gone down this path with Alex Sarr, with Bilal, with Keyshawn, with a lot of players, and you just got to let them develop. So yeah, I'm not going to come out here in year one and say that I'm very concerned about Trey Johnson because I'm not. But truth be told, he was really bad on offense and obviously really, really bad on defense, and I got blown by a lot. Apart from that, obviously Tristan played well again in the second quarter. The Wizards opened the second quarter of 11 of 13 from the field, like couldn't miss, opened a 10-point lead. But then 18-4 Sixers run. Somehow, some way, Washington, again, makes 11 of its first 13 field goals in the second, couldn't miss, still trails 73-71 at halftime. Both teams couldn't play any lack of defense. The Wizards just played less defense than the Sixers, it seems. And then the second half, you had a couple of good moments. Riley had a poster dunk on a Dembona with a nice timed cut. He had another corner three and then another one late in the game. He finished, I think, with 18 on 8 of 12. 2 of 6 from three, but again, 6 of 6 from inside the arc, which is always intriguing. Had a couple of really nice plays, some nice passes as well. And then Tyrese Maxey goes off. It's an 11-point lead for Philadelphia. At the 9-minute mark of the third quarter, Washington was down 4, 85-81. At the 6-minute mark of the third quarter, they were down 104-83. Again, another one of those instances where it's like a big Sixers run, a Keith timeout, but then the Sixers run continues because, again, Keith doesn't make any actual adjustments in that run. And so obviously not ideal. I think it was 92-81, Keith timeout. And then what is that? Another 12-2 Sixers run after the Keith timeout and then another timeout. So clearly what Keefe said or what he tried to adjust didn't work, which has been a theme this season. And by that point, the Wizards gave up 120 points through three quarters. Like just some of the worst defense I've ever seen. Tyrese Maxey and Edgecombe had like multiple, and not just like one or two, like three, four, five instances each where they just dribbled down the floor and nobody picked them up, where they just blew by their man and no one was there to greet them at the rim. Now, a reason for that is because no Sar, no Reese, obviously AD's out. Your centers or your rim protectors are Tristan Vukcevic and Anthony Gill. And when Gill wasn't playing and Tristan was in foul trouble, Jameer Watkins sort of served as a small ball five. Like there was no interior presence, and I'm sure the Wizards weren't too upset about that in terms of their rebuilding and their tanking. But that's a reason for it. And PG had 39 and made him look like Pacers Paul George. He's been terrible all season for the Sixers, and the Wizards made him look like the all-star, all-NBA player that he used to be. Not a shock. Again, like I mentioned, 153 points allowed. It's the most since 1962 by the Sixers against the Wizards. Just one of the worst defensive showings I've seen. And like I mentioned at the top of the show, yes, you're probably thinking like, why are you getting so annoyed at a team that has 6 games left in its rebuilding season? They're trying to lose. Shouldn't a loss be great? You can separate the loss from the fact that this was one of the most pathetic efforts that I've seen all season. And it's honestly even worse that I feel this way when you're rebuilding, because if they weren't rebuilding, then obviously the reaction would be even worse, because you shouldn't be allowing 150 points in general, let alone when you're trying to compete and win. But even when you're not, when you're trying to lose, sort of, it's still pretty disappointing and sort of an indictment on this team and where they're at the moment. Moving past the actual game recap, because I'm sure a lot of you, I had a lot of comments that were telling me that they turned the game off after the first half, after the first quarter, or sorry, the third quarter. Again, can't blame any people. I'm sure Wizards fans have started to tune this team out for the last couple of weeks, and certainly over the next 2 weeks as the season winds down. With just 6 games left, I doubt many Wizards fans are still watching this team. I'll be watching them, so I'll have these game recaps up, obviously. But again, another blowout loss for Washington. That is now, I believe, 17-59 on the season. And I did the math, and I'll like release this as like a full thing at the end of the season, so I get a full scope of like genuinely how bad this team was. But that is now Washington's 46th loss of the season by double digits. Their 26th loss by 20 points, which is actually insane. Apart from that, they didn't lose by these figures tonight, but just to add it on, they've lost 16 games by 25 or more points, and they've lost 11 games by 30 or more points this season, which is pretty embarrassing. They're tanking, and you knew it would be pretty bad at the start of the season. And if they get the top pick, nobody will care. But at the moment, I care, and I think it's pretty bad. So I thought I just wanted to add that in. But obviously, Washington loses again by 22. I mentioned, Tristan played pretty well. So did Champagny, 17 on 7 of 10 from the field, 7 boards, 2 blocks. A pretty banner night for him, typical off the bench. Anthony Gill, best game as a pro, low key. Career high 21 points on 8 of 9 from the field, made all 3 of his threes, 6 boards, 6 assists, 0 turnovers. Really, really good night from Anthony Gill off the bench. A lot of people think he's just a bench warmer or morale guy. He's clearly still a pretty good player. I mentioned Trey struggled. Bilal and Bub pretty quiet. 13 on 5 of 14 from the field from Bub, 12 on 5 of 10 from the field from Bilal. They were both a minus 30 or worse. They weren't that good, obviously, on the offensive end, but certainly not good on the defensive end. 7 assists to 0 turnovers is nice for Bub. The guy turns the ball over a lot. That was cool to see. Made some good passes. But on the defensive end, again, him and Trey still really bad on ball, on the perimeter. And even Bilal struggled on the defensive end, one of their better perimeter defenders. Again, apart from that, like Hardy, 1 of 8, not good. Jameer, 1 of 3, 7 points. Sharif, 11. Those are only guys that played 10-man rotation. But again, Washington just played no defense. They scored 131 points is a lot in regulation. But to score 130 and still lose by 20 is also a very impressive feat in and of itself. But that's sort of going to do it for that game recap. What I think is the most intriguing thing for me tonight, and the best news for Wizards fans, is they've now officially clinched a bottom 5 record with just 6 games left and at 17 wins. Even if they go 6-0, the best that they can do is 23 wins. And the 6th worst team in the league right now is the Mavericks, and that stand alone at 24 wins. So Washington can't catch them by default. They can only finish inside the bottom 5. which means that they have now clinched a 99.4% chance of keeping their pick. If they finished five, and that's the worst again that they can finish, that means that they would have a 0.6% chance of getting the ninth pick. And every other percentage is a top eight pick, which is obviously why that's that's the reason for the 99.4% chance that they keep their top eight protected pick. Because again, they want to be bottom four, but just wanted to add that in that bottom five, obviously at worst, now they will have a 99.4% chance of keeping their pick. It's still looking incredibly likely that they'll be bottom four. If you pull up the tank standings real quickly, which I'll do right now, you obviously have Washington, whose magic number of losses, 6 games left. All they need to do is, I think actually now it's 3 losses with 6 games left. Yeah, 3 losses is the magic number. Because if Washington loses 3 more, they can only get to 20 wins. Utah's already at 21. Then they'd be solidified in the bottom four records. And so they need to lose 3 more games. Again, in my opinion, they have 3 winnable games, one against Brooklyn, 2 against Chicago, and then they have 3 winnable games, or sorry, 3 games that I think they'll lose. I think it's 2 against Miami and then 1 against Cleveland. So they're still looking good at the tank standings. And what's going to be a really good result for them tonight is the Indiana Pacers are actually up 25, a little over halfway through the third quarter on the Chicago Bulls. Siakam's playing, some of the other guys are playing, and they're dominating. They're up 25, 108 to 83. Unless they have a complete collapse there, it seems like they'll win that game. And what's really big about that is that would put them behind Washington in the tank standings. For the first time in a while, it would mean that the Washington Wizards would stand alone with the league's worst record, which again is sad, but also it is the goal and it would be really good. So Washington would be 17 and 59. Indiana would be 18 and 58. That would be a full 1 game lead on Indiana in the tank standings, which is huge coming down the stretch. And it would still be a 1 game lead over Brooklyn, who would be tied with Indiana. You also have Sacramento, who has 19 wins. They're currently in the third quarter on the road at Toronto, winning by 3. I doubt that score holds. If it does, it'll be massive for Washington because then it would make them closer to guaranteeing a top three, or sorry, a bottom three record, which would give them the 14% chance at the top pick. So it's looking like it could be a really good night for Washington in the tank standings. Pathetic effort on the court, really bad defensive effort, one of the worst I've seen in a while. But it's looking good tanking wise. Obviously, you would prefer Utah to win. They're home against Denver, down double digits in the second quarter. They'll probably get blown out in that one. Didn't expect them to win that one. But Indiana winning would be big because Washington would now be in sole possession of the league's worst record. And if you pull up Indiana's schedule and see, do they have any more winnable games? They still have to play the Brooklyn Nets one more time. After this, they'll have, I believe, 6 games. They have to play Charlotte, Cleveland, Minnesota, Philly, and Detroit. They'll probably lose all of them. But if they win tonight, that's 18. They beat Brooklyn, that's 19. That could very well be enough for Washington to maybe win 1, maybe 2 games at the end of the season. And then at the very worst, they'd be tied with Indiana for the worst record. And that tiebreaker is a coin flip, which obviously is better than being the second worst team and not even having a chance at that. And again, I know that in the new lottery system, since it's been in the league, the worst team has yet to get the number 1 pick. I get that the last couple of years, that team has fallen to the worst it could get at 5. I understand that. But if you're going based on the actual odds of it, you want to protect yourself. You're the worst team. You have the same odds as a lot of the teams around you at 2, 3, and 4 pretty much, but you also can't fall outside the top 5. And if you tell me that I can enter this draft and my floor is Darius Acuff, then like you can't lose in this draft. Versus if you tell me my floor is Wagler or Flemings or someone like that, that changes things, I think, because I think a lot of people have the top 5 with a decent separation between them and maybe 6 and 7 and 8 and so on. Just like the top 3 is probably a little bit separated from 4 and 5, etc. And so I think if you're Washington, yes, that based on the previous history of it, I understand some people not wanting it, but I think based on that, you want to be at worst top 5, and I think that obviously would be preferable for Washington. Apart from that, that's sort of the tank standings, like I mentioned. Washington's sitting pretty good right now. They have 6 games left in what feels like it's been a long season. They are off for a while, 2 days off until on Saturday. They're at Miami, 3 o'clock start, back-to-back Sunday at Brooklyn. Here's what I think they'll do because they've been doing this all season. I think in Miami, Alex Sarr has been questionable the last couple of games. I think you'll see Bilal, Trey Johnson, Alex Sarr, Maybe you'll even see like a Julian Reese or a Leaky Black, and they'll play that game against Miami. And then that gives Washington leeway to say, hey, these guys have been battling injuries for a minute now. It's a second of a back-to-back. Typically teams would bench these guys anyway for rest. We're just going to do the same thing so that they don't get looked at as, oh my God, they're resting all of their good players. And they'll have only 8 or 9 available players against the Brooklyn team that they're fighting with in the tank standings. I think that's the smart approach because that Brooklyn game is huge, right? You're probably going to be separated by only a game. A win there makes you tied with Brooklyn. A loss is a 2-game lead and basically gives you a pretty much clinched spot at a bottom 3 record. I think Washington will play a bunch of its guys, obviously not the 5 guys that have been out for a while, I think, but a bunch of its guys I think will play on Saturday against Miami, which gives them leeway to sort of say, hey, we're resting these guys, and hopefully you don't think it's tanking because this is typical to rest guys that have been battling injuries on the second of a back-to-back. That's Brooklyn on Sunday. It's a big game. Then they got 2 at home against Chicago. Chicago's getting destroyed right now by Indiana, even at home. So it's pretty clear that they are beatable. They're not good. And maybe, Washington splits that and maybe they lose both. They could win both. I really don't know what that series will look like. You can go now for $10 get-in price, which is funny. But then they got home against Miami and then at Cleveland. So I think, again, those will be losses. They're looking good from the tank standings perspective. But that's sort of a look into the future. I'll be back, I would assume, on Saturday to break down that game against the Miami Heat. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Wizards podcast. The Wizards fall 153 to 131, and they fall to 17-59 on the season. Indiana, basically at the end of the third quarter, is nearly up by 30 points. So the next time you hear from me on Saturday, most likely Washington will be in sole possession of the NBA's worst record, which again is pathetic, but at the same time, it's the goal. And if you're going to be really bad, you might as well be good in terms of tanking, and they're really good at it. And so that's probably going to do this episode of the Wizards podcast. Thanks for listening as always. Go Wiz.